5-color commanders are fairly popular given they allow your commander deck access to every color, and thus the widest potential card pool. While many of the available 5-color legendary creatures are somewhat niche, there are some that have risen to prominence within the commander format. So today we'll be going over 10 of the most prolific and powerful 5-color commanders. Starting us off at number 10, we have Morophon the Boundless. This legendary shapeshifter costs 7 generic mana and has 6 power and toughness. The keyword Changeling makes it so Morophon counts as all creature types, and when it enters the battlefield you choose one specific creature type. Spells of that creature type cost 1 less of each color of mana to cast it, although this effect only reduces the amount of colored mana you pay. Creatures of this chosen creature type gain +1 power and toughness. As an example, Sigarda, Host of Herons, costs 2 generic, 1 green, and 2 white mana. But if you had Morophon that selected Angels, then you'd only need to pay 2 generic and 1 white mana to cast Sigarda. So for those unaware, color identity for commanders is based on all mana symbols on the card. So even though Morophon's casting cost is generic, the cost down ability technically makes him a 5-color commander. Beyond that, this cost down effect encourages playing cards that cost different colors but have minimal generic costs, which plays directly into the sorts of decks that Morophon was designed to support. Morophon exists as almost a catch-all commander for any Kenrith strategy. Since Morophon is always all creature types, it benefits from any and all Kenrith support, and in turn offers a commander for decks that lack a proper Kenrith commander, especially one in all 5 colors. A creature type such as human will have legendaries like Rick, Steadfast Leader, which would make for a playable commander in their own right, but Rick, in this example, limits you to only plain white cards. But instead, playing Morophon, you can play literally any legal human in your deck, and also cast many for discounted costs, if not outright free. Morophon does not have an ability that specifically aids any one strategy, and instead is so generically passable that any Kindred deck could at least consider if Morophon offers anything for their deck. That said, this does not translate directly into a spot in the competitive sphere. Morophon, arguably more than any other commander on this list, is a casual card. It exists to help bolster Kindred decks like in support, and Kindred decks just aren't really a thing when measured up against what you'd find typically in competitive commander pots. A lack of other competitively relevant 5-color commanders, coupled with just how popular Morophon is for a variety of decks, is what ultimately lands Morophon on this list. Even if Kindred decks aren't competitive, they remain one of the most popular strategies in the format, with plenty of creature types still waiting for a commander to suit them best. And those left waiting will usually use Morophon in the meantime. And at number 9, we have Esika, God of the Tree. This legendary god costs 1 generic and 2 green mana, and has 1 power and 4 toughness. Esika has Vigilance, which means it can attack without tapping, and has an ability to tap itself to add 1 mana of any color. Other legendary creatures gain both of these abilities as well, meaning every legendary creature on the board can attack freely, then be held back to block or use for mana post-combat. This alone is a novel mana-fixing effect, but far from an exciting commander. Esika, however, has a backside, one that can be cast as an alternative to the creature at any point you could cast Esika herself. This enchantment is the Prismatic Bridge. At the beginning of your upkeep, it makes you reveal cards from the top of your library and to reveal a creature or planeswalker card, which you then put onto the battlefield. Then put the rest of the cards into the bottom of your library in a random order. This effect is prone to variance, but generally, Esika decks load up on powerful effects in hopes of slowly building up an impressive board. Esika, or rather the Prismatic Bridge, lends itself to good stuff piles, but can also be leveraged for more focused strategies. While she's by no means a major threat, some fringe competitive commander play with Esika playing the role of a stacks deck. Stacks is a control strategy built around shutting your opponent out of options. Many of the most powerful stacks options limit all players, making it hard to even do a basic action such as casting a spell. The Prismatic Bridge breaks parity by allowing you at least 1 creature or planeswalker for free each turn, while opponents struggle to get any permanents on board at all. This is, of course, just one way of playing Esika, and the real reason that she's become such a popular commander is the sheer variety of decks she can support. Flexibility of theme in the form of powerful effects is perhaps the biggest draw to the commander, especially for the more casual-oriented. She can cheat out practically any creature or planeswalker in the game thanks to bearing all 5 colors, meaning there's no telling what the Prismatic Bridge might reveal until it's too late. This is what makes Esika so popular in casual play. since you'll maximize the number of splashy permanents on your field. In particular, Planeswalker-focused decks, otherwise known as Super Friends, are popular for her since she gives you access to all of them and can play even the most expensive ones for free. Just be sure not to include a copy of Phage the Untouchable unless you really want to live on the edge each turn. And at number 8, we have Ulalek Fused Atrocity. This legendary Eldrazi costs 1 hybrid colorless mana of each color, and it has 2 power and 5 toughness, as well as the keyword Devoid, which makes it so for that gameplay purposes, Ulalek has no color. Whenever you cast an Eldrazi spell, you may pay 2 colorless mana, and if you do, copy all spells you control, then all other activated and triggered abilities you control, and you may choose new targets for those copies. On a casual level, this opens the door to double up on any of your big splashy Eldrazi, like It That Betrays, or abuse some cast triggers, which many powerful Eldrazi have. Eldrazi have always been a popular theme, and Ulalek was their first and most prominent 5-color commander. But what earns it a spot on this list over the likes of Azlath the Swailing Scourge is Ulalek's higher potential in competitive pods. While you're only allowed to use Ulalek's ability when you cast an Eldrazi spell, it copies all spells and abilities you currently control. This means if you cast an instance such as Tainted Pact, then flash in an Eldrazi like Dimensional Infiltrator, then activate Ulalek, you copy Tainted Pact as well. This synergy gets even more powerful when combined with a way to reuse Ulalek's ability multiple times. Creatures like Delnay, Streetwise Lookout outright copy the triggered ability and can set up even more outrageous combos. Ulalek isn't able to copy mana abilities, but can make use of something like Voltaic Key to untap a mana rock. You can add in an activation of Voltaic Key to your stack before resolving Ulalek's trigger. This will give you 2 Voltaic Key abilities. You'll be able to use those to untap a mana rock that taps for enough, like a mana vault, to repeatedly pay for Ulalek's ability and pay for the Voltaic Key, and basically full control of the stack. Ulalek is a very complicated commander with lots of powerful use cases and applications in both competitive and casual. Casual in particular makes the most of Ulalek's ability, often drawing your opponent into a backbreaking Eldrazi, while still threatening the same complex level of stack manipulation. The main reason it's this low on this list is that, at the time of writing, Ulalek is such a new commander to the format that people have not had much time to properly explore the deck, let alone give the meta time to adjust. But between its casual Eldrazi builds and its more complicated competitive stack manipulation, Ulalek is likely to be a mainstay in commander pods for years to come. And at number 7, we have Jenson Carthalion, Druid Exile. This legendary human druid costs 1 green and 1 white mana and has 2 power and toughness. Whenever you cast a multicolor spell, scry 1. And if that spell was all colors, you also create a 4 power and toughness angel creature token with flying and vigilance. You may also pay 5 mana of any color and tap Jenson to add 1 mana of each color. While Jenson's ability to make free Serra Angels every time you cast a 5-color spell is novel, and his color fixing is helpful, neither of these abilities are what really push Jenson into realms of playability. For many Jenson decks, especially those at a higher power level, he's hardly even your commander. This is because Jenson, thanks to commander color identity rules, is a 5-color commander whose mana value is just 2. This means you can have a 5-color commander deck with Lurrus the Dream Den. Lurrus is a legendary cat nightmare which costs 1 generic and 2 hybrid white-black mana, and has 3 power and 2 toughness and lifelink. Lurrus has the keyword Companion, which means as long as you fulfill a certain requirement, you may put it into your hand from outside the game for 3 generic mana at sorcery speed. This essentially gives you a second commander, albeit one that's harder to get back if it's removed. In Lurrus's case, each permanent card in your starting deck must have a mana value of 2 or less if you wish to have it as your companion. The downside can be limiting as it keeps you from playing some notable staples, but in return, Lurrus provides a great deal of value. During each of your turns, you may cast 1 permanent spell with a mana value of 2 or less from your graveyard. Not only does this allow you to recover from removal, you're able to use cards like Mishra's Bauble as a card advantage engine. And since Lurrus only restricts the mana values of permanent cards, you're freely able to run a card like Ad Nauseam to facilitate winning the game. Ad Nauseam is particularly good in these Jenson decks since the deck's mana curve is naturally quite low, meaning every time Ad Nauseam gives you an extra card, you're likely to take only a few points of damage, if that. Jenson is a fascinating commander, partly because he himself is so unimportant to the deck. The mana fixing he provides can be occasionally helpful, but he's only really your commander because of what he allows you to run, rather than what he himself does. In fact, Jenson recently received some competition in the form of Ezio, another 5-color commander with a mana value of 2, who can occasionally knock out a problematic opponent a bit quicker than they otherwise would lose. Ezio is likely to be the more popular commander in the long run from a casual perspective, given the prevalence of kindred decks. However, Jenson isn't completely without a home in casual, since he is a great commander for multicolor matter decks when divorced from playing Lurrus. While Ezio may sneak its way into a lot more casual pods, Jenson is the more competitively slanted of the two, at least for now. Yet both remain novel ways to play a 5-color commander deck. And at number 6, we have the first Sliver. This legendary Sliver costs 1 mana of each color and has 7 power and toughness. The first Sliver both has the keyword Cascade, but gives it to all Sliver spells you cast. Cascade, exile cards from the top of your library whenever you cast a spell with Cascade, until you exile a non-land card with a lower cost than the spell you cast. You may cast the spell you exiled without paying its mana cost, and put all the other exile cards on the bottom of your library in a random order. Much like Ulalek, the first Sliver does not earn its spawn this list due to its synergy for kindred decks. Sliver decks have other options for commanders they'll generally get more value from, like Sliver Gravemother. The first Sliver usually proves a better fit in the 99, where it can help barf out even more Slivers while your actual commander provides setup or recovery. When removed from the realm of casual kindred decks, however, the first Sliver is a great win condition for a 5-colored Food Chain deck, which has given the card a home as a competitive commander. Food Chain is an enchantment that allows you to exile a creature to get X mana of any one color, where X is 1 plus exile creature's mana value. While you can only spend this mana to cast creature spells, there are still plenty of ways to abuse this. Some creatures, such as Eternal Scourge, can be cast from exile, meaning you can exile it to Food Chain and gain enough mana to cast it again and net 1 extra mana left over. You can repeat this process to gain infinite mana of every color, which is where the first Sliver comes into play. You can repeatedly cast your commander with this infinite mana, cascading into a spell every time you do so. The first Sliver decks tend to not run any spells with a mana value higher than 4, as to ensure they can go through their entire deck. It's just a matter of exiling your commander to Food Chain and recasting it again and again until you've cast every spell in your deck and can assemble a win with Thassa's Oracle or any other number of cards. The first Sliver is far from the first commander to synergize with Food Chain, with cards like General Tazri filling similar niches. However, commanders like Tazri require other support to actually win with the outlet that can sometimes be convoluted. Meanwhile, the first Sliver's cascade is straightforward, going through your entire deck spell by spell until your near inevitable win. Food Chain is a classic strategy in competitive commander, and many consider the first Sliver to be the definitive commander for the deck. But Food Chain is far from the top strategy in the format these days, and while it still has a place at many competitive pods, it's far from being worth the top spot on the list. And at number 5, we have Sisay Weatherlight Captain. This legendary human soldier costs 2 generic and 1 white mana and has 2 power and toughness. Sisay gains 1 power and toughness for each color amongst legendary permanents you control. By paying 1 mana of each color, you may search your library for a legendary permanent with a mana value less than Sisay's power and put it onto the battlefield. Although she takes some effort to get online, there are plenty of cards to help get to her ability quickly. From there, Sisay is a versatile toolbox able to search out all sorts of legendaries. In the early game, hate bearers like Lavinia, Azoria's Renegade, can impede faster combo decks from getting too far ahead. Sisay trades off on speed for her wealth of options that come from having instant speed access to almost any legendary creature in the game, assuming you get her to a high enough power level. This flexibility also shows up in her avenues to victory. While most competitive decks use Dockside Extortionist in one form or another if they can, Sisay is able to tutor up Emil the Blessed and potentially go infinite if Dockside makes enough treasures. She also makes better use of Planeswalkers than most competitive decks, with her main combo centering on using Oath of Teferi to give all of your Planeswalkers an extra loyalty ability activation each turn. From there, it's a matter of assembling Nico Bolas, Dragon God, who gains the abilities of all other Planeswalkers on the field, and Amintau, the Fate Shifter. Nico Bolas has an ability to draw you a card and force an opponent to exile a card from their hand or field. Amintau has an ability to exile another permanent you control, then return it to the field. These 3 cards, all of which can be searched up by Sisay, will eventually leave the opponent without any cards and allow you to draw through your whole deck. It is a 3-card combo, which makes it far from quick to kill, but Sisay's game plan is built with this in mind. It's an adaptive deck that uses her powerful abilities to ensure you're working towards whatever is best for the current situation, while threatening a few different potent combo kills. Legendary creatures are unsurprisingly popular even in casual commander, so Sisay's toolbox playstyle translates well there, allowing players to play any of their favorite splashy legends and the perfect shell to support them. Some even approach their Sisay decks as 5-color builds of a different legendary creature, and using Sisay as a way to bridge into the deck's actual focus. And at number 4, we have Kenrith the Returned King. This legendary noble costs 4 generic and 1 white mana and has 5 power and toughness. Kenrith has 5 activated abilities, which each take a different color of mana. By paying 1 red mana, you can give all creatures trample and haste until the end of turn, meaning they can attack without summoning sickness and deal any excess damage over lethal in combat with a creature to the defending player. For 1 generic and 1 green mana, you can put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. 2 generic and 1 white mana allows target player to gain 5 life, and paying 3 generic and 1 blue lets target player draw a card. Finally, for 4 generic and 1 black mana, you may put target creature card from graveyard onto the battlefield under its owner's control. These 5 abilities are all simple, yet decently effective, if somewhat costly to use in excess. But, as has already been established with previous entries however, a lot of competitive games are won off the back of infinite combos, particularly combos that generate infinite mana. In that regard, Kenrith is arguably the best commander around, considering he's a game-winning infinite mana sink that gives you access to every color. The aforementioned Dockside Extortionist is often the most important card to find in most competitive games, since it facilitates some of the easiest infinite mana combos in the game. Kenrith's abilities are even worded in such a way that they can be leveraged as political tools, since you can target your opponents with these beneficial effects. Of course, that's more of a corner case scenario for what is overall abundantly straightforward commander. With infinite mana, Kenrith will gain you infinite life, draw your entire deck, give all your creatures haste, and make them infinitely big with trample, even if you have to revive them all from the graveyard. The commanders are powerful thanks to being an infinite mana sink, but there really is no comparison between those and just how perfect of a game-ending mana sink Kenrith is. It's both his greatest strength and also part of why he's not higher on this list. He's straightforward and simple, without much going on beyond being the best, most generically good option in a category commander that's at a premium in competitive pots. When it comes to the realm of casual, he certainly has a home, but there's no specific strategy that he helps define or support. Instead, Kenrith is a good commander for when you don't really have anything else to do in the command zone, or make active benefit of his abilities, like wanting a consistent source of haste for your creatures, or wanting a backup option for reanimator strategies. Regardless of if it's casual or competitive, Kenrith is defined by his wealth of options and lack of direct focus, leading to a powerful, if generic, commander. And at number 3, we have Codie, Vociferous Codex. This legendary artifact construct costs 3 generic mana and has 1 power and 4 toughness. Codie makes it so that you cannot cast permanent spells at all while it's on the field. In return, he has an ability to pay 4 generic mana and tap Codie to add 1 mana of each color. When you cast your next spell this turn, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile an instant or sorcery with lesser mana value. Until end of turn, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Each other card exiled this way is put onto the bottom of your library in a random order. While Codie's ability is both positive in mana and provides a pseudo-cascade effect, his downside is so severe that the ability really needs to be game-winning. Fortunately, thanks to the help of Profane Tutor, a single Codie activation can often do exactly that. Profane Tutor is novel in that it has no conventional mana cost, and is instead intended to be played via the Suspend mechanic. This means Profane Tutor's mana value is 0, and thus something Codie can exploit. If you can activate Codie's ability, then cast any 1 mana value spell, you will exile cards until you hit an instant or sorcery with a lower mana value. Profane Tutor will then be the only card in your deck Codie's ability can actually hit. This essentially turns Codie into a tutor in the command zone. If you're going for the win, this tutor will usually search up Ad Nauseam, and you'll have 4 mana left over from Codie's Suspend on Ad Nauseam, meaning that the whole line is relatively inexpensive on your mana. This gives Codie a certain explosiveness throughout even the earliest stages of the game, since an opening hand with some mana rocks and Dark Ritual can often win on the spot. Codie is more of an all-in than most Ad Nauseam decks, especially given his rather steep downside. But in return for being so linear and all-in, you get some of the fastest wins in Commander. Of course, Codie's aggressive playstyle does draw a lot of attention, meaning Codie players will likely have to contend with the pod ready to check their nonsense. And when it comes to casual play, Codie often winds up playing as a silly gimmick deck, leaning more on novelty than actual strength of gameplay. If any format is a home for novelty, it is Commander, which is part of why he remains popular even if he's not the best, especially at a more casual level. And despite its shortcomings, Codie's niche as a hyper-aggressive competitive commander easily earns it a spot on this list. And at number 2 on this list, we have Najeela the Blade Blossom. This legendary human warrior costs 2 generic and 1 red mana, and has 3 power and 2 toughness. Whenever any warrior attacks, you may have its controller create a 1 power and toughness white warrior creature token that's tapped and attacking. During combat, you may pay 1 mana of every color to untap all attacking creatures. They gain trample, lifelink, and haste until end of turn. After that phase, there is an additional combat phase. At first blush, Najeela might seem closer to the kindred commanders earlier on this list than the higher end competitive threats towards the top. Her warrior synergy is nice and leads to some incidental inclusions and builds, but her true strength comes in her activated ability. It is both repeatable and not limited to just warriors. This means as long as you have a means of producing the mana, you can take as many combat phases as you'd like. Druid's Repository gets a charge counter whenever a creature you control attacks, and you can remove a counter to add 1 mana of any color. Thus, as long as you have 5 or more creatures to attack with that will survive combat, you'll get enough counters to instantly pay for Najeela's ability and take another combat. This can repeat until your opponents are all dead, and this is just one of the cards that Najeela can pull off the combo with. It can be as simple as attacking with Vigilant Fatebearer Elder and tapping it for mana after doing so to pay for Najeela. This makes for a versatile and quick deck that can put up combat pressure that is always a card or two away from spiraling into lethal. Unlike Kenrith, which is an outlet waiting for good stuff strategy to helm, Najeela encourages a more focused and quick-paced game aiming to win as fast as possible. One of the deck's greatest strengths in competitive spheres is the level of backup plans it has. Beyond its main combo, it also runs demonic consultation lines and can even rely on classic aggro beats in a simplified game state. Najeela is a combo deck that can play the aggro game, and as such, it has explosive potential at basically every turn of the game, and it needs to be respected. Even more casual Najeela builds have massive potential to take over a game off the back of impressive turns with 2 to 3 combats. Even when not using her as a combo outlet to win, the sheer damage she helps push through can put her on par with many other aggressive casual decks. All of this makes her undoubtedly one of the best commanders ever printed. However, there's one 5-color commander who is certainly more egregious, even if he doesn't have quite the same competitive chops. And finally, at number 1, we have Golos Tireless Pilgrim. This legendary artifact scout costs 5 generic mana and has 3 power and 5 toughness. When Golos enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. By paying 2 generic and 1 mana of every color, you may exile the top 3 cards of your library and play them without paying their mana cost for the rest of this turn. Golos is the definition of a generic commander. Basically, any sort of strategy at any sort of power level could use Golos, given he has access to every color and an effect that basically any deck could appreciate. Even for aggressive decks where ramping is less important, Golos can search any land, meaning any utility land imaginable is up for grabs. In the realm of competitive commander, this often came in the form of searching Boseju, who shelters all, to make all your game-winning instants and sorceries uncounterable. However, Golos reached true notoriety not for his place in the competitive meta, but rather for how ubiquitous he was in casual. Golos' abilities muscled out a lot of other commanders who just did not measure up to the long-term generic value Golos offered. From a casual sense, basically any strategy that wanted to play 5 colors could run Golos, and many people opted for exactly that. Shortly after his printing, Golos was one of the most built commanders on popular commander decklist sites. Even if you initially wanted to play a 3-color commander deck, Golos allowed you to splash powerful spells from other colors and provided the mana fixing you'd want via his own ability. 5-color decks already benefit from a wide card pool, and Golos and his generic casting costs made it laughably easy for almost any strategy to play fast and loose with the color identity rules that were core to Commander. As such, for all of these reasons and more, Golos was banned entirely from Commander, and is to this day the only 5-color commander on the ban list. Despite not being as overwhelmingly strong as the likes of Najeela, in return, the sheer ease of use and ubiquity of Golos made it a nightmare for lower power level tables until it needed to be dealt with. Alright, and that's the list. Are there any cards you feel like were worth an inclusion, or any other topics you'd like to see discussed? If so, let us know down in the comments below.